What's going on, everyone? Scott here. Welcome back to the channel. So we're here. We are at Jenn's hometown week on The Bachelorette, which means we are getting closer to the conclusion of Jenn's journey on The Bachelorette this season. Four hometowns tonight: Marcus, Devin, Jonathan, and Jeremy. But before we do jump into those hometowns, if you could just hit that like and subscribe button down there for more Bachelorette content, as we're seemingly coming up on the last two-ish weeks of the season. I believe they're wrapping it up before Labor Day, so I believe we got about 2 weeks left. So we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. So the preview we got for the episode was Jonathan's hometown date about his sister-in-law. Believe it was talking about how fast him and his brother moved, about, saying I love you within, a couple weeks, or moving in within like a month or so, about how they, sped along this process so time really isn't a factor if it's the right person. Then we jump in to the hometowns, and Devin gets the first hometown date in his hometown of Houston, Texas. Looks like they're doing a little run with his run club that he runs with every week. They all have Jenn and Devin shirts on, and I feel like it's a cool real world date into what a normal day could look like for them. And I really like the music playing in the background. It was a nice edit, nice touch to the date. Jenn talks about the nicest thing that Devin has done for her, and Devin talks about his favorite trait of Jenn's, talking to a couple of his friends there in the run group. And when they're talking about the relationship to his friends, Devin says, she loves me, and kind of slips out, and his friends were like, oh, okay, so that's where we're at. Then towards the end of the day portion of the date, Devin's dog is there. They play catch, have a nice little blanket set up in the grass there. And so that just goes to even more of what a normal, Saturday could look like for them. Devin tells Jenn that his dad will be there tonight, who has been in and out of his life, which we learned earlier this season on one of their one-on-ones, because he believes he couldn't get married without his opinion on things, even though he has been in and out of his life. They're at Devin's house, and they have a sign outside that says, "Welcome home, Devin," and "Howdy, Jenn." Devin's like, they wouldn't even do that for my birthday. They're meeting his mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, brother, and his stepdad. Devin is nervous because he hasn't introduced someone to his family in 10 years. Jenn and Devin run through everything that happened on the journey once they get to this point in the journey, once they get into the house. Devin tells his dad he loves her, but doesn't want to tell her and her turn around and choose someone else. Obviously, we know that's part of the process, but right on Devin to be worried. Especially with his family, who has struggled in relationships, in his words, but wants this to be different. His dad is just worried about the other guys in this process, like any family member is for anyone that comes to a hometown date on this, franchise, because, it is a weird process. Let's just be honest here. But we keep it going, and Devin's mom asks Jenn what makes Devin special, and she says how they relate on similar ways with the way they've grown up and some of the similarities and some of the struggles that they've maybe had in their lives. Jenn says his mom reminds her of her mom. She says they've both said they've expressed that they were falling for each other and how she can see a future with him. Devin and his mom have a heart-to-heart and where he's at in the journey, and how he's gone places in his heart with her that he hasn't gone with anyone before. He says that he does love her, but is scared to tell her, as he said to his dad earlier. And his mom says, don't hold back. You're not going to be the one if you don't put it out there. As soon as they get outside, basically, they share a couple words, talking about the day and how the interaction with the family went. And he pretty much just right away says that he does love her. So gets that out. First person on the season to actually tell Jenn, like, for real, that they love her. So that's big for Jenn. Know that this process is working for her, and big for Devin to open up to her. Jenn says how she's falling so hard for him. Successful hometown for Devin. So now it's time to move to Fairfield, Connecticut, and Jeremy's hometown. They go to the grocery store, pretty elaborate, wild grocery store with animatronics and everything going on. They had popcorn, donuts, all this other stuff. Another solid real world date though, in my opinion. Jenn is even ringing people up, and Jeremy's bagging the groceries, and Jenn thought she was getting new jewelry when they said they were going shopping, or boots, and stuff like that. Well, she got donuts, popcorn, and animatronics, which I honestly think sounds like a better date to me, personally. But we keep going, and they're actually there in the grocery store eating, and Jeremy's aunt just so happened to be in the store. A nice moment, even though Jenn had a mouthful of food as she's introducing herself to Jeremy's aunt. But they arrive at Jeremy's home, meeting his mom, her husband, older sister, and fiance, and then his younger sister as well. Then Jeremy tells his family about his night one limo entrance and how he drove up in the sports car and said, "I know people with sports cars are usually compensating for something, but I have a really big, and then he actually said the word. I still always forget that was him coming out of the limo night one and did that. And he made it this far. I mean, I guess good on him for sticking around this far and having that entrance night one. But Jeremy's mom says that when Jenn was introduced as the Bachelorette and she described what she wanted, she said, "That's not Jeremy." Jeremy's younger sister says that she doesn't think he'd be ready to get engaged with the timeline of everything. And she did say that she'd wish they hit the benchmark of opening up and saying how they felt about each other after her and Jenn talked, and Jenn said that how they hadn't got to that point yet. Jeremy doesn't think he has walls up after his sister, lets him know that Jenn feels like he might be holding back a little bit and has some walls up. So Jeremy's surprised. He does tell his mom that he's happy and comfortable around her and has a lot of fun together. But she asks, it can't just be about, fun. And Jeremy's mom was like, this is obviously a big decision. You got to talk about all this big stuff and all the the normal family mom stuff, whatever. And Jeremy's like, well, she likes me the most. And I appreciate the confidence from him. It's just, especially as an audience too, we've barely seen Jeremy at all. We've seen him for his one-on-one date last time. But besides that, we really haven't got much of Jeremy. I'm not here to say he's a good person or a bad person. We just haven't seen a lot of him. So we haven't seen a lot of their relationship develop, and that's just how the story's gone this season. Either way, I appreciate the confidence from him. Jeremy's mom and Jenn do chat, and she asks how he stands out, and Jenn says how they have the best time together, and how he's emotional and is always thoughtful for her, but wouldn't be here if she didn't see a future with him, but asked if she thought that he would be ready for an engagement here, just coming up very shortly here in a couple weeks. His mom said, "I just met you." Okay, no kidding, but okay. And she's like, if it's the right person, maybe, but didn't give a very confident answer to settle Jenn's nerves here. And Jenn asked Jeremy after hometown date is over and they're outside, saying goodbye, if he's ready for an engagement, here at the end of this. And he said how his feelings are growing and how he says how he is falling in love with her. So he does finally admit those feelings for her and tell her the feelings that he's having for her. So as Jenn says, this is a huge step, but still some questions, I feel like, and it seems like Jenn is still thinking there might be some questions here still. Next up, we're in San Diego for Jonathan's hometown. Jenn needs him to open up a little bit more. She says Jonathan takes her to play lacrosse. Jonathan being lied to in his past really is what's making it harder for him to open up. Jonathan is honest that he isn't there yet in terms of love, but Jenn appreciates that he is honest about where he's at in the process, but worried if he's not going to get there. Now, meeting Jonathan's family, going to be meeting his mom, dad, brother's wife, and his sister. Jonathan is looking for the franchise bingo word that we all love, clarity. They tell the family everything that's happened up to this point in the journey. His brother's wife says how they said "I love you" in the third date. They've been together 7 years, married for 4. Time really doesn't matter. And that was kind of the preview we got at the beginning of the episode. His brother says she thinks they're a good match. They seem happy, but he is worried because of the last relationship, how it went from happy to toxic very quick. Jenn says she thinks they are on the cusp of starting to fall in love, but how they haven't expressed those feelings to each other yet, how they're not there yet, but possibly on the cusp of it. His brother is kind of emotional and just doesn't want Jonathan to get hurt. And I mean, rightfully so, obviously, but that's just the tough part about, this situation in the show. Jenn and Jonathan's mom talk, and she says that she can see herself being with him long term because he's someone who sees and understands her, but she is just struggling with knowing exactly where they are and how she feels because of him maybe holding back a little bit and not fully opening up. But she understands why, because they've both been in toxic relationships and, understands possibly having that guard up. His mom knows that there's a lot of work to be done, but he's got to open up. His sister tells him, don't hold back if this is what you want. His mom also tells him how she said that he was being cautious, but I guess understanding from his past of, why he does have these walls up. But he does ask his mom if he sees her as the person that he could be with long term. His mom says yes, but she says you got to just close your eyes and be willing to fall back and trust. You'll never know if you don't put it all out there. And it seems like that was the clarity that he needed, because when they're outside talking after the hometown date there, he says to Jenn how this opened his eyes up for him so much, and he says that he's getting there. Jenn's like, sorry, like, what did you say? And he says, Jenn, I am falling for you. She says the same to him, that she's falling for him as well. So big steps for Jonathan and Jenn on this hometown. Next up, we're going to Tacoma, Washington for Marcus's hometown. Jenn is worried that she's further along than him, with him struggling to open up to this point, even though it seems like he's had two one-on-ones and seems to have made a lot of progress throughout this journey, but struggling to fully get there at this point, it seems like. Meeting his little sister, his adoptive parents won't be there, but it's just going to be a bunch of his friends as well. Going to the house, I was like, whoa, that's quite a bit of people. Usually these are a little more, intimate. Usually like the day portion, you could have more people, like friends, whatever. I understand every situation's different, but that could definitely be a little overwhelming, but I'm sure Jenn will handle it well going in, and she does. She kills it. But once they get in, they tell everyone about the journey to this point. He's looking for some clarity and wisdom from his friends. He says to one of his friends how he thinks he's stuck somewhere between really, really liking her and loving her, because he's not there yet. He realizes he doesn't want to miss out on something so great that's right in front of him, and hoping that today will bring that realization for him. And again, that clarity. Jenn says she thinks Marcus is someone she can see a future with, but how that they haven't shared their feelings to this point, and scared of not knowing how he feels. Jenn and Marcus's sister talk about the trauma and the ups and downs that Marcus has had throughout his life and been throughout his life, and how he struggles with allowing himself to be vulnerable. Jenn's been through a lot too, and that's why she said she sometimes struggles to open up. Jenn starts crying and says how she is falling in love with him, but she doesn't want to get her heart broken either, because she's been there. And his sister says she thinks he's really happy with the way how they walked in and how they were with each other. Then Marcus and his sister talk, and he says he's opening up the best that he can and just trying to get out of his own way. He says it's hard for him to picture the end right now when she asks, how do you see the end of this playing out? He does get emotional, though, talking about how he wants to be a father. And, his sister just tells him, like, you got to let that guard down, let it in. It's all scary, but it's worth it at the end of the day. Then at the end of the day, he does tell Jenn that he is falling in love with her. And Jenn is very happy, as obviously, as she said, she's been waiting for him to open up for a while. And she says she's falling for him, too. Good steps for Marcus and Jenn. And then after this, we go to commercial break, and we got like 24 minutes left. I'm like, what is going on here? Is there going to be some crazy thing at the rose ceremony? But we just have a little interesting, the guys meet up for a last conversation before heading to the rose ceremony. Definitely an interesting, thing that we haven't seen before, really, at least in my memory. At a bar having a drink and talking about how everyone just brought the same girl home to meet their families. Not awkward at all. Usually you don't see a whole lot of group interactions this late in the process. So everyone expressed how that they'd probably be ready to get down on one knee at the end of this. Marcus feels like he's behind, and saying he's just trying to understand why. He tells the guys about how he maybe has some reservations and how he needs to feel some things unapologetically to get to an engagement. Devin says he doesn't have any reservations, that he's already there. Marcus says it's like a feeling of shame. He said Jenn deserves to have guys here that are certain. So it seems like Marcus is still struggling a little bit to get fully there. We saw him like a little bit, but I feel like maybe a little bit still he's just kind of getting in his own way with some of his feelings. I mean, understandably so, with, even just the surface level stuff that we've heard on the show. Obviously, he knows and Jenn knows more of what he's been through, but it seems like just kind of just getting in his way a little bit at this point. But at the rose ceremony, Devin gets the first rose, then Jonathan, and Marcus does get the last rose, and keep this journey going. 2 fantasy suites for those 3, but that does mean that Jeremy ends up going home. I think, obviously, as I said earlier, during its hometown, we didn't see everything, but this seemed more of took a little bit of a longer time for this relationship to get going. Obviously, it was the last, one-on-one, and I know Jenn said that that's why they had the last one-on-one, because she knew what she had with Jeremy. But I just feel like, as a surface level, kind of as I said earlier, from an audience perspective, we didn't see a lot of that relationship. Like last week when he got that rose to move on to the final 4, like they had a really good one-on-one date, but it was like, is this a little bit too late? Like it was a really good date, but it was still, moved him to hometown week. And I think they do have a lot of similarities too, but I think that hometown, not that the hometown was bad, but especially hearing the reservations possibly that his family had about him getting to that point and about how they hadn't really, just until, right here. I know it's kind of a different story with Marcus though, because they've had, multiple one-on-one dates and a more connection to this point in the journey. Whereas Jeremy, at least from what we've seen, hasn't been that much connection. Then they had a really good one-on-one the week before hometowns. Then they go there, have a pretty good hometown, but the reservations from the family about him possibly not being there, I'm assuming that obviously went into it too. Obviously, they had a lot of fun and connected well on that. It was, nice to see their dates. It seemed like they had a really good time on their one-on-one date last week and their hometown date this week as well. But that deep stuff, we did see them have a deep conversation at the one-on-one. That's one of the main reasons why I think he got that rose to move on to the hometown. But just some more of that deep stuff is really so important, this far along in the process, this close to an engagement. Jeremy says that he thought that they were always on the same page. And Jenn says she's petrified. That does she think she's on the same page with someone when she's not? We do get the preview for hometowns next week. It's going to be next Monday and Tuesday, so we get a nice little 2-night episode. And I have a kind of sneaky feeling that the next 2 weeks are going to be 2 episodes, Monday and Tuesday, to finish off this season. In the preview, we see Jenn tell Marcus that she's in love with him, and he says, "You make me feel so good, but I'm not there yet." And we see Jenn get upset, and I know a lot of these trailers and stuff that we see in the show is, usually very edited and heavily edited even in some cases. This looked like a straight cut. So that looked like the conversation that happens. I'm assuming next week I said when we saw this kind of at the mid-season, preview for the second half of the season, I said this looks like possibly a, overnight fantasy suite date. And it seems like that's when it's going to be happening next week. And, maybe it's not. And maybe it's, the week after and, finale week. And I should, whatever. Obviously, no spoilers here. I don't know anything. But, it seems like we're getting that conversation. And that seems what the conversation is, not super highly edited. But then we do see Jonathan saying that as his, love feelings grow, so do his fears. Then we see Devin upset and crying, and we saw that promo at the mid-season, promo as well. And I was saying I thought that was, close to the finale as well. And we see him upset and saying, "I want to get to the end with you, but I don't know how." Wow, so it does look like, as it usually is, it looks like a very emotional final few episodes here. And I'm guessing Monday will be fantasy suites and then possibly, ending on a cliffhanger, and then, kind of leading into that rose ceremony on Tuesday and then getting to the men tell all after that. And then, they'll probably bring out the person who ends up going home at the fantasy suite rose ceremony that week. And then they'll bring them out, at the men tell all is what I'm assuming will happen. And then I'm assuming a week after, it seems like they probably want to wrap this up before Labor Day here coming up in 2 weeks. So we'll probably get that next week. Then the week after, I'm assuming, maybe they'll just do 1 3-hour on Monday, but maybe if there's enough, content and substance there, they can, move it into 2 hours Monday, 2 hours Tuesday, and, kind of wrap up Jenn's journey that way. But it seems like Marcus might not get there, even though it seems like Jenn's there. And then who knows what happens with Devin? I mean, going into after kind of this date before we saw the promo, I was kind of like, right now I'm thinking it's Devin just because I don't know if Marcus will get there. But after seeing that, which who knows the content of that, situation with Devin, obviously I know a lot of it, as we just said with the Marcus conversation, is highly edited. So who knows, what's that? Can Jonathan get there and open up as well and knock those walls down? I don't know. I don't really have a good guess right now. I guess right now I'm still, maybe leaning towards Devin a little bit, but no spoilers on our end, but that's still kind of where I'm leaning right now. We'll be back next week to recap both nights of The Bachelorette, Jenn's journey, as we're going into Fantasy Suite Week and coming down towards the conclusion of Jenn's journey on this season of The Bachelorette. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.